Now I think I can open the floor for questions. If you guys are nice enough to stay, I think we still have quite a bit of audience left. I think we have so far 80 people still remaining with us past 15 minutes our time. So maybe a point man in terms of the questions. Can you please start?
Al, I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thanks again for all the presenters, excellent presentations. Richard, I'd like to start with you, and I think this is relevant for Enrico as well. I-Core is really an excellent program, and I had the opportunity to participate in that program here in the US. The way it's done in the US is that we have regional hubs or trainings spots, and the University of Arizona is one of them. And then after that, we're encouraged to go to Washington, D.C. for the national training, which is more intensive. And because of time commitment, I didn't apply last year. But you mentioned that USAID is going to be there only for another year or so, at least for the current program. Is there any plan for the I-Core program that you started to be turned over, say, to the Department of Science and Technology, given that it's really a highly valuable program? And Enrico mentioned that there is a need actually for the TBIs to get to know more of their customer needs. And I think that's very much covered in I-Core. So please tell us your thoughts.
I'll go first then. Thanks, Joe, for that question. It's actually a question that we've been pondering for the last year or so also. So yes, primarily it's a DOSE program already. So there's nothing to hand over because it's really theirs.
Oh, okay.
They funded most of it. We funded part of it. We gave some technical assistance. So I think prior to the pandemic, our plan was actually to apply for a new program which we shared together. We'll actually build a train-the-trainer component where we'll actually have a formal, like an NSF, because I believe I-Core has a formal training program where like you're a certified instructor. So
Right.
we would like to have that local capability and just do it ourselves. In essence, we have the right people already, even in this room.
Correct.
We don't have to have that same branding per se. So yes, I think it's just a funding right now is a question of how we run it. But I think with Stride being around for a bit more, we can try to support it somewhat indirectly. And to your point about regional, I think Al would chime in here because he was a big promoter of this. He really wanted to put this out where you can bring the training locally. You don't have to go to Manila to take an FEC program, right? And there's a lot of budding researchers there who are looking into entrepreneurship, but maybe don't know how the first step is. This is sort of like a team-based approach, right? So yes, that's in the works. We value that, but I think there's some funding consideration I have to think about and also how we run it out. But I think the capability is here. So even if we are not able to run it directly ourselves with DOST, I believe the players here, DOST, also can sort of do this independently later on.
Right. Thank you. Enrico, do you have any comments for that? Because you mentioned about these regional or regionally distributed TBIs. And I think that this would really agree with that plan. Okay, maybe we lost him.
Sorry, thank you for the question. Yeah, I was already speaking earlier, but I was muted. Yes, there are now 30 technology business incubators that are running all throughout the country. So this will enable also our budding innovators in those regions to have access to the benefits of having an incubator in place to support their work and the needs that they have as budding entrepreneurs. We of course, part of the challenge that we have in that area is to also prepare these technology business incubators. That's why we also have a mentoring program that matches, of course, our more mature TBIs with those that are starting off, so that they can be oriented on how to properly guide and nurture their TBIs in the regions. You mentioned earlier about that customer search. Maybe in this context, we also need to provide maybe the challenge is how to also ensure that the startups know their TBIs and what TBIs will
Right.
best fit them. In some cases, actually, we'll have something like, two or three, even three TBIs in one region. And they actually have a choice of which TBI that they can be incubated in. It's not necessarily in the same university where perhaps the researchers came from. Sometimes it's a matter
Yeah.
of what team is the TBI espousing. So it's one of the, I think, the features of this TBI program that they carry a theme, specific theme, so that it will also have some show focus in what they do and what kind of projects they hope to also support. Thank you.
Thank you. Al, I've got one last question for Louis, if that's okay.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, Louis, I like your upscale program, which is the Market to Lab. And I think that this really directly addresses what Gani Padolina was mentioning before, to have that sort of industry alliance to be able to support one another in terms of R&D. But my question really is, and my understanding is currently you're addressing local companies here. But talking now about a globalized innovation ecosystem based in the Philippines, do you have any plans to extend this as well to global companies that have manufacturing capabilities in the Philippines, and perhaps to incentivize them to have R&D cooperation with UP and other universities in the Philippines?
Yes, definitely. That's in our roadmap, and I think we're in good shape to accommodate that, especially as we streamline our processes and make sure that we don't have any hiccups, legal and technical along the way. So I think we're in pretty good shape to accommodate those opportunities. So just let us know. If you can, we would appreciate any leads or referrals for collaboration.
Well, my recommendation for you would be to link up with the Board of Investments or the Department of Trade and Industry, because they're the ones with a direct contact with these global companies that are entering in the Philippines. I think that linkage there, communication, would be really quite productive and fruitful. But thank you. I think you're doing the right thing.
That's great advice. Yeah, we are working with our senior partners to expand from our current pilot partnerships into something that will really scale up. That's good advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
actually,
Al.
Joel, we just had BOI Dichosa in UP Upscale present about the opportunities for the Board of Investments for registration for startup companies. But it's a good point that we need to tie in our offerings in the academia to show the true breadth of the ecosystem in the Philippines, not only DOST, but UP and DTI. And I have Secretary Pernia in the audience, who would have been headed the Innovation Council, for us to invite. Exactly. This is your dream, Joel. I remember at the 2018 in our meetings in Malacanang and in NEDA with Secretary Pernia. And I've yet to feel that we are nudging or getting closer to it. But clearly with this pandemic, hopefully with the comfort of people talking by Zoom now and not having to travel and being able to establish contacts and connections to these companies, like Ann Villalobos is a good lead to Johnson & Johnson. You probably can be a good lead for Arizona, Carlito, and California. Again, PAASE can be very instrumental in promoting this global S&T ecosystem, and I think that's probably our next, if not our game, in the future. And I hope everyone in the audience can see what they want to do when they grow up. Maybe a Carlito and they grow up, or they can start being Jerome first, or collaborate with Gani first. And of course, Eric will help them. And if they need teaching a little bit, maybe they can get courses from Louis' group. But this is the way an ecosystem works, guys. So I'm so happy that a lot of you stayed in the audience. And clearly, this is just the beginning. I always tell everyone, and I hope maybe Secretary Perja, Secretary Ernie, can you say something
Yes, yes.
in your efforts all these years.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Just a very simple, quick question, Al, Dr. Al.
Yes.
This has to do with. I think the question can be answered by someone from the OST or PShared. I'm interested in. Well, it looks like from the many presentations we have had during this PAASE months, there have been so much activity uh, going on, and really looks like science and technology innovation is really getting a second life. As I've said in my talk earlier, life begins at 40, and since PAAS is already 40 years old, I think in its second life, it can really be more active, more energetic, and more productive. Anyway, my question is just not technical, but just financial and maybe economic. In the past, the figure that had been coming out in terms of government support to science and technology and innovation, or R&D, was only around 0.15%. I wonder, under DOST, I know that DOST has been much more active compared with previous DOSTs. I wonder if this number has risen, has improved. And the other thing, an interrelated question is, given that so many private companies are interacting, or the researchers interacting with private sector companies, is government through DOST, DTI, or NEDA, whatever, is it able to stimulate or catalyze more funding for science and technology, research and development, innovation, and so on? Just those two questions, because funding is always important to get our science and technology innovation ecosystem really become self-sustaining in the future. Thank you.
Eric, do you care to answer Secretary Pernia's question?
Yes, thank you very much, Secretary, for your remarks about the level of activity that the UST has fared, no, through the years. We'd like to believe that it's through the strong support also of our partners in government that we are able to realize, and of course from the private sector and various organizations as PAASE in getting this done. But if you look at the statistics of the UST, actually, you would see that in the last 3 years or so, the total budget of the Department of Science and Technology had been truly flat, not around 21 billion pesos annually. So that has been our peg. And I think in the last few years, especially in this administration, we've been really working very hard to pitch through the DBM that our budgets be increased, particularly in for research and development, because our operations are mainly flat, but we wanted to provide more opportunities for our researchers, for our research facilities, for our startups and innovators to have more opportunities for them to further develop their technologies to gain traction in the market. So, yun po talaga ang kwento. And then on your second question, if whether there had been strong support for research and development, particularly for startups and innovators, that's what we just came up with. We came up with implementing rules and regulations jointly with the ICT and DTI just last year, a few months after the Innovative Startup Act was passed. And then we are now coming up with specific guidelines on startup venture fund on startup grants, which actually focus on particular needs in these areas. So we were just caught not ready, coming from the 2020, no, sorry, from the 2019 to 2020 budget cycle. We had not yet prepared for it, but hopefully in the next, in the coming year, 2021, we already included the plans and programs that will incorporate activities to be more actively supporting startup and innovation activities, so that our innovators will have more access to this as we proceed with their activities.
Is the
Thank you.
is the number 0.15% of GDP? Is that already rising? Is it closer to 1% of GDP?
1%.
No,
I think it's less.
we need to record that, so we can compare ourselves with our ASEAN neighbor countries, comparison neighbor countries in ASEAN. We need to have that kind of information.
Yes, sir. If we compare, actually, that's a little bit lower. I think I think the number would be something like 0.14% of the GDP. And because our total budget has not been rising, so the denominator, but the denominator keeps on increasing, it's actually getting lower. So unless we really have a remarkable increase in our budget, we will not be able to realize those increase in that GDP ratio, R&D spending or S&T spending to GDP ratio.
No, but I think you should also record the counterpart funding from private sector, from the private sector, or from other universities, either public or private, in terms of this whole effort of
Yes,
science and technology innovation. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Secretary, that's a very good suggestion. In fact, in now in our systems for accepting proposals and monitoring projects, we now see to it that the counterpart funding and support, collaborative support coming from partners is also included in the accounting of expenses and funds in the programs, because we noticed really that we are sort of discounting also our partners' contribution. So this is a good way for us. When I say having a system, I mean we are already putting it in our monitoring system, and this is this will enable us also to report such figures in a more comprehensive and reliable manner. Thank you for pointing it out.
Okay, thank you, Al.
Thank you, Secretary Bernia. Actually, that was part of the question that I asked at the economic session last Monday with Jeff Docanes, if the UST or DTI in the Innovation Fund can actually match private sector investment in startups and technopreneurship efforts. And that's exactly, I don't know, Vic, do you want to add to that? Is there something like that in Australia?
Yes, Australia, the way it's done is, so you have your R&D expenditure that at the end of the year, you declare it, and then the government reimburses 43%.
Wow.
So it's almost like, you put in money, you get like 50-50, but then there's already, you essentially showed skin in the game, but then the government respends. So that would help you the accounting as well. So the government can then track how much they gave as well, then, because that's corresponding to actual investment of the private company on its R&D.
Perfect. That's, well, I mean, I'm a product of the US SBIR program where I got initial grants in '97 to start my company. And for me, net carryover, NOLCO, net loss carryover was very critical and time for our investments as well when we were raising Series A, Series B. and declaring our profitability. So clearly, there are some economic aspects to entrepreneurship that we can look at, but it starts with the OST. Too bad CP David left already, because a lot of these efforts were initiated during his time as Fisher director. I don't know if he's still there, but I want to give a shout out to him because he was early partners with Stride and UP in terms of this effort. Even just the conversion to Innovation Council was actually CP's efforts. But I'm so happy that Eric has stepped up to the plate and really getting the monitoring and the evaluation of those companies. I like your last slide, Eric, in terms of amount of investment, jobs created, number of startups is nice, but really it's jobs created and amount of money invested from private sector is the marker for me of in terms of the traction that these technologies are getting. So I think we're past 11, guys. Thank you very much for staying all this time. Is there
Yes.
any burning last questions out there? Or forever hold your peace until the next session?
May I?
Oh, there. El Presidente, we were looking for you.
Well, in context of PAASE, and also I realized that actually PAASE has made a big difference already, Ernie, because so many of our local members have collaborated with our foreign-based members, including Jerome with Gobet Advincula. So Louis, the nano biocomposite materials, I'm glad UP is working on it, but looks like in De La Salle, they are able to bring it to market. So congratulations, Jerome and De La Salle. Now, I'd like to just point out a revolutionary technology that our co-awardee, Dan Tagle, described to us, the microphysiology system. And I'm not sure, Ernie, if you were present in that session, but it's to overcome the obstacles in my area of research. So my major problem is, while this field of marine drug discovery has always been attractive and it's been justified, especially in the Philippines, because we are with the highest marine biodiversity in the world, and now we're working with the microbes and we have libraries of extracts, etc. We're not able to move this forward as fast, although Louis has identified the patent applications that I have now for 2 compounds. But I think that Dan described this new technology that might change the field of drug discovery. And he also mentioned that companies in the US are actually taking on the technology. And in fact, I saw Genentech was one of them. And so I asked Homer about Genentech, how they're going to get this technology from the NIH and CATS to their companies. But anyway, I think my question to the UP and to the DOST would be, what's a scenario where researchers like us, who can't ever be the lead persons in preclinical animal trials and human clinical trials for high-value drugs like anti-cancer or antimicrobial or anti-pain, what's a scenario where we could collaborate with, well, it doesn't look like we can do it directly with US NIH and CATS, but I'm talking with Dan about it. But on the other hand, if they're really sharing this technology under certain terms with private companies like Genentech, what's that scenario where the Philippine government, UP, DOST, would allow us to engage with such companies? Okay, so maybe Eric can answer that, and also Louis. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Giselle. Well, you know, Jimmy should have been here to answer that question because of course it's his. mainly for us, if it's like technology where the the partner in this case will be a company who's has some stake in the technology. I think it's clear for us that partnerships are still possible. The terms for the intellectual property and technology transfer just needs to be maybe defined properly so that it can be sort of a guide when you start to collaborate, and then as your of course your the fruits of your collaboration also mature. Um, we specifically provide, of course, support to the institution, the research institution, the local research institution. But at the same time, as I mentioned to Secretary Pernia earlier, we also start to account for the contributions of the partners. So it's a natural. It's now becoming a more natural relationship. It's now just a matter of writing it down on paper so that it's clear to everyone how the relationship will actually be working as we go along the process, and even after the project or the activity had been accomplished. So rest assured, it's I think it's now becoming a more acceptable arrangement in some of our R&D projects. Even at smaller scales, we now do that. Perhaps the more extreme, hindi naman siguro extreme, no, but a little bit more extreme case is when we start requiring our researchers to find industry partners before they could actually be allowed or be approved for their research grant. That's one of the scenarios that we're looking. How far are we going ahead into making this a requirement? It's an evolving process and a discussion among us. Thank you.
I'd just like to say that this group is valuable. So I hope you can keep this group and grow it. So obviously the ones who attended this meeting, this session, are the ones who were stakeholders, who were interested in this. So there's no stopping having this group meet again and give more talks. So it's going to take a life of its own. And I think
Yep.
at this point, it's important for Joel Kellyan and myself to assert what we think should be a goal, the major goal of the PAASE, which is to create those STI ecosystems in our country. And in Joel Kellyan's plan, if you recall, it included, of course, academe, and then government, and then we also wanted to include MSMEs or SMEs, but we also wanted to include global industry. Is that right, Joel? Yes.
Yep.
So maybe you can say something about it, Joel, because I think it's critical that this kind of investment by global or foreign industries would help us. And it's not
Yeah.
a question of piracy, Eric. No, we
Yeah.
are protecting ourselves in terms of our intellectual property. So we've gone a long way in doing this in UP and obviously also in LaSalle. And we have the DOST helping us with your TAPI funding for our patents and patent applications. So maybe a word from Joel regarding this.
Okay, so just real quickly, thank you, Giselle. So the way that we design the ecosystem is it includes, of course, participation of government, of the academe, and private companies as well. Of course, civil society has a say on that as well. And then, of course, we would like both local companies as well as global companies. And for a developing economy, emerging economy like the Philippines, it really can use infusion of foreign direct investment, and that is through the global companies. And that's where the Department of Trade and Industry, the Board of Investments, in cooperation with the DOST and NEDA, can really play a pivotal role in making that happen. And also the entrepreneurs in the Philippines, when the global companies are present there, it would create more opportunities for the startups because they can plug themselves into the value chain, the supply chain of the global companies. And so it's an upward spiral with this ecosystem. The great thing is that there are already a lot of global corporations present in the Philippines. Quite a lot of them are doing manufacturing, but the missing link is the connection with the research and development. For the Philippine ecosystem to really go up the ladder of development, there is the manufacturing, but then there has to be the R&D as well, in cooperation with the universities in the Philippines. So when that happens, there's really this upward spiral that takes place, where you have more companies that are local, that are domestic, that are Filipinos, startup companies, small, medium enterprises that get plugged into the value system of these global companies. And then after some time, they themselves can create their own companies that become global as well. So in summary, that's really what we're trying to design here, what we're trying to achieve here. On Monday, in the session that we have in the creation of regional science and technology innovation ecosystems, this is precisely what we will be addressing. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Joel. Actually, start with Jerome. But thank you very much for staying all this time. We're now past 11:15. I would have to close this session before they cut us off. But thank you very much for all your efforts, guys, in making this a very good communicating effort session for everyone. And hope you guys have takeaways and will spur you to action to do something so that we can rebuild our economy. And we have Secretary Pernia to lead us. Thank you very much. And I would say, until we meet again.
Thank
See
you
you
all.
soon. Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Thank you.